Hi, friends, fellow evolvers, and curious people everywhere. I'm Sally Wilson, and I have as my very special guest today, Dr. Catherine Fyans. Welcome, Catherine.
Lovely to be here, Sally.
Now, Catherine, you used to be a GP, is my understanding, yes, and you retired last year.
Yep.
But what I'm fascinated with is how your views differed to a lot of people in your field. I'm just wondering if you can talk us through how your views differ and how your approaches to medicine perhaps differed from those around you.
Well, that's a long story, and that's quite a large can of worms, but I'm happy to open that somewhat. And look, that's actually why I wrote my book some years ago, because people did ask me that question. I thought, well, I'll put it down in this little book to explain my point of view. And it ended up being a book that explained my point of view. And I do want to emphasize, it is my perspective, it's my point of view.
Yep.
And that's going to be quite different to many others. So I suggest people take from it what they might find helpful, but leave the rest. So there's a bit of a history behind my views. And I did 6 years of medical school. I was a doctor for 41 years before I retired last year, and 6 years of medical school prior to that. And really during the first 5 years post-graduation, I was very adherent to what I'd been trained, to the Western medical paradigm of medicine. In fact, I was scathingly dismissive of anything that didn't fit that paradigm. And because of a series of synchronicities, I found myself working as a volunteer doctor in a place called Dharamsala in North India with Tibetan refugees. And that experience was very pivotal to me because it absolutely changed my worldview. And there I learned of the primacy of mind, of consciousness regarding health and life in general. And that's never left me. It just made sense. It just resonated with me. So since that time, I did many, many studies, and I've really had a foot in both worlds. But stayed working in Western medicine all that time. So from back then, my views were different. And I see mind and body inextricably linked for everything, really. So to look at just a physical complaint as just a physical complaint actually makes no sense to me.
Yes.
So I'm looking at them both working together in a holographic fashion, I might add, rather than a linear cause and effect fashion. So it's more the realms of quantum physics rather than Newtonian linear mechanistic cause and effect.
Yes.
Yeah.
So was it difficult for you to practice medicine in the way that was true to you when you're in Australia, where the medical industry, it's very highly regulated?
Yes.
How did you go about working with people in the way that was authentic and integrous to you?
Yes, and it was difficult, without a shadow of a doubt, and it became more difficult, particularly recently. And really, I had to work with the patient's reality rather than my own.
Yeah.
So not negating my reality and my beliefs, but it was not my role to push my beliefs onto the patient, but work with them as best I can. So if I saw a patient that could resonate with my ideas, we would have that discussion quite openly. If I knew, like more at an instinctive, intuitive level, that they were not interested in that area or they didn't want to go there, then I would avoid it. And I was very good at putting my normal medical hat on, and that has its place, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, not at all. It's just my interests encompass the whole mind-body connection.
And so, I mean, I know that you're not giving medical advice now, and that you're not a practicing GP, but let's just say if in the time when you were practicing, I came to you as a patient and I was very open to different ways of looking at things and the power of the mind and quantum physics and health is a very holistic in a holistic approach. How would you start to work with that sort of person?
Look, I'd probably start with, saying something fairly simple like, what's going on with your body, your physiology, your biochemistry is not separate with what's going on in your life, and particularly in your mind, your emotions, your consciousness. And as we know, particularly, I might mention the influence of the vast unconscious mind on health, because that actually is my interest area. And further to that, unresolved childhood wounding, particularly the effects on the unconscious mind and by extension, the body. So I would put it in fairly, simple terms, and some people would be very receptive to that. And then we'd have a further discussion, what you've lived through, what's been going on over the last couple of years. So to give an example, I remember some years ago, I saw a woman who had chronic abdominal pain. Now, she'd had every test under the sun, so I knew there wasn't something urgent physically that needed to be addressed, because as a doctor, I had to cover that base, of course.
Yes.
Okay. And this just was more of an intuitive direction. It was suddenly I said, well, what was going on in your life at age 34? And I don't even know where that name came from and that number came from. And she said, oh, my mother-in-law was dying, quite a distressing death from some sort of abdominal cancer. And she saw the link immediately and her pain went. It completely went. Now, I'm not saying I did that sort of work on a regular basis, not at all. But that was one example. But for example, let's say, the fatigue syndromes, hypothyroidism, whatever it might be. What I believe is that the body's always trying to be on our side, even during the experience of illness. Okay, it's trying to compensate. So it's not the body that's a problem, it's the body's response to the directives, particularly from the unconscious mind. And, the wisdom of the unconscious mind, or lack thereof, depending, might be saying we have to slow down. We have to slow down. We have to slow down the metabolic rate for whatever reason, because not doing that would be more of a threat. So I would tie that into it as well as doing the usual tests and investigations and treatments. But again, it was very dependent on the person I was working with, their reality. Primarily.
And so how did you develop your, I don't know whether to call it your intuitive ability. I think it's more develop the ability to hear it, isn't it? Trust it.
Absolutely. And it is for me particularly. I have a good intuition. We all do. But trusting it and being courageous enough to trust it. That's still a work in progress for me, for sure. It really is.
I for me too. Not the only one there. And so did that process though begin with the awareness that you developed as you were volunteering as a doctor in India?
Well, where I worked in India, it was a very, this was back in the mid-80s, so a long time ago. And it was a very unsophisticated little hospital without a lot of resources. But it was a Western medical hospital. So there was a Tibetan medicine hospital down the road, but I was working at a Western hospital.
Right.
But it was the environment. It was the people I met. It was experiences I had. It was the environment in general. The Dalai Lama literally lived up the road. I mean, literally. So, and this was a place nestled in the Western Himalayas. So it was absolutely beautiful. So for me, I had to be taken out of my usual environment to be presented with a different worldview. And not everyone has to. But I went to some lectures and studies while I was there. And there was the mind-only school of Tibetan Buddhism. Now, I'm not a Buddhist, I'm not religious, but I took the opportunity to learn some things while I was there. And it talked about the primacy of mind consciousness. And it just made sense. I remember thinking that just completely resonates with what I believe. So, and I'd been denying what I had intuitively known all that time until I was there and was presented with that experience.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, your book is called The Wounding of Healthcare, yes? From fragmentation to integration.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about your realizations in terms of the links between childhood wounding or childhood trauma, as some people might refer to it, and illness?
Yes, and a lot of that came from experience, because I would see a lot of people, and I'm generalizing here, so there's always exceptions to the rule. Okay, I'm generalizing.
Yeah.
But I would see certain clusters of different illnesses that really didn't fit well into the medical model, and for which the medical model didn't have a great solution. Yep. So a lot of these people had these conditions going on for many, many years. And there were certain clusters, I won't go into details of what they were. And because Western medicine, generally speaking, has quite a reductionist left brain, science-dominated approach, and that, of course, has its place and is very, very good for some things, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
But that approach alone can deny what we're experiencing at a deeper level. And I would hear a lot of people say, oh, no, but I've dealt with that. I've had counselling. It's, I've dealt with it. It's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But their bodies were telling me a very different story. So I was seeing patterns. Yeah. And, and when we really delved into their history, there was a lot of wounding that, I would assess was unresolved. It might be resolved mentally, intellectually.
Yes.
There might be a great deal of insight, and I'm all for insight, but it's not really resolved experientially.
Yes.
Because they often didn't have the language for that. And the system didn't necessarily have the language for that. But there are great practitioners in the system who do this work, I know. We know. Yes. Yes. So I'm looking at the overall system, not the individual practitioners.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Because,
Yeah. And just to clarify for people who are listening or watching this, so mentally some things can be resolved, and we're talking the conscious mind there, aren't we?
We're talking the conscious mind.
Yeah. And the subconscious or the unconscious mind may not be in agreement with that resolution. It 100%. May not be.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, yes. And they often have very different, as we know, very different agendas.
Yes.
And often the conscious mind is complete. And I've experienced this myself. Yeah. I'm thinking, I believe this. I 100% believe this. And, maybe during a kinesiology session or whatever, it's like, oh, no, your unconscious mind does not believe that. Sorry. Yeah. And that's like, oh, okay, I better have a look at that. So they can have very, very different agendas, and they can be opposing each other. And that could be an example. Okay, I want to get well, I want to get well, I want to get well. They, a really strong conscious determination to get well. But, unless the unconscious gets on board, because being unwell, whatever that is, might be saving them from something that is perceived as being worse than being well. So it's trying to protect the being. And yes, we set up all our defenses related to our childhood experiences, and particularly if there's a lot of wounding, if it's unresolved, then we can develop a lot of defenses, and that will have a physiological translation.
Yeah.
And, at a mind-body level, defense is inflammatory. It's quite inflammatory, and it will affect our immune systems.
Oh, it's all so fascinating. When I was a kid, my one of my grandmothers died of cancer, and I remember reading the books of God, I don't know how old I was. I must have been, 8 or something, 7. Right. I mean, not old. And I remember picking up some books that were on mum and dad's bookshelves by Dr. Ainsley Mears.
Oh yes, yeah, I remember Ainsley Mears.
And they had a huge impact on me as a child. Wow. And then I went on to read some of Ian Gawler's, following on from Ainsley Mears, Ian Gawler's approach.
Yes.
Do those approaches, do they resonate with you? Would you be able to elucidate what they are, what those approaches are? I'm sure you can much better than I'm able to.
Well, I don't know if I can, because it's a long time. It's decades since I've looked at Ainsley Mears' work, but he was way ahead of his time. Well, when I say that, there are a lot of people way back who were very aware of what we're talking about, but he was so well respected. So, and Ian Gawler, we know Ian Gawler, I don't want to speak for him, but I think most people know his story, that he healed himself from advanced cancer through meditation techniques. Now, I'm not personally acquainted with them at an intimate level. I do have his books and I have read them, but he used the power of the mind, the power of meditation to heal. And I'm assuming Ainsley Mears did very similar things.
Just, look, the Ian Gawler books, that was the first time I came across, well, not surprising considering how little I was, but I came across the imagination as a tool for healing. Would you be able to talk to that a little bit from your perspective?
Imagination.
Yes.
Well, and look, I don't have all the answers. I'm trying to work this out as best I can. It's an ongoing exploration for me. Most definitely. I'm definitely on the upstroke of the learning curve. But imagination, well, it's the power of the mind to create something maybe other than our, say, current day-to-day experience, usually in a positive sense. And I would say that thought, that concept, particularly if it goes into the unconscious mind, entrains. It entrains the rest of the system. So what we hold in our minds strongly can, and we're getting into quantum physics, create our reality. I like to say co-create our reality, because I never like to put out there that the ego mind is creating our reality. I actually think that would be a very dangerous thing. So an inspired creation of reality, a co-creation from a deeper sense, a deeper inspired sense rather than the ego mind. So, you know, I often say that our consciousness, our mind, is our great untapped healing tool. But we're not trained to do that, generally speaking. So, and we're learning, we're all learning. You know, there's not a consensus on how we go about that. But there are many people and many great systems that are putting the pieces into the puzzle.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, you know, often when there is illness of some sort, of any sort, there's often an accompanying fear around the illness. So how would you help people, or would you help people dissipate the stress of the fear as a part of their healing? How would you go about that?
Well, fear it's a normal human emotion we're all going to have. Okay, so we're not going to get rid of our fear. You know, it's a hardwired survival mechanism, but we want to learn to manage our fear. Now, we've been subject to fear programs regarding health, and that's one of my reservations about, you know, maybe the Western paradigm of healthcare. We've been taught to fear our bodies, okay, and we've been taught, you know, that fear will produce health. Well, fear is a powerful motivator in the short term, but prolonged fear is not consistent with health, and it cannot be because the energies are disparate, okay? And we know it adversely affects our immune systems, but we're all going to have some fear, and it's very normal. I would normalize it first. It's normal. You're going to feel fear. Not make it wrong, not make it bad, because we're going to feel fear. I will feel fear. But I like to point out that our bodies are on our side, and we're very, very influenced by the collective consciousness and beliefs. And no more compelling are our beliefs than our beliefs about healthcare. So even the word cancer is loaded with fear from the get-go. Okay, so it's got a potent, almost like a spell associated with that word. And that is very much going to influence people. And that might be more than the problem, rather than the actual physical condition. Now, I'm not underestimating that. And of course, it has to be dealt with as best it can be. And I like to quote, and not everyone appreciates this quote, but a famous quote by Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist, and he said, "We're not so much meant to heal our illnesses but rather our illnesses are meant to heal us. Now, a lot of people would be confronted by that statement. And we've got to be very, very careful, I do, that when we're talking about self-responsibility, you know, looking at our mind, that it's not a blame game. Yep. It's not about blame at all, but it is about insight, awareness, and understanding. So again, I might talk about those things that we've laden certain conditions with fear, and maybe give examples of people who have defied all odds. And there are plenty out there. And I think maybe it was Carolyn Mose who said it can be like a curse given a diagnosis. Because if we take in those beliefs, the collective beliefs associated with that diagnosis through the mind and the subconscious mind, that might well affect the outcome.
Yes.
Okay. So we have to remove that conditioning associated with certain terminology because language is so powerful.
Yes, and be vigilant what beliefs we accept as truth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I had an interesting personal experience, Catherine, where I had to be very vigilant not to take certain beliefs on that I had been told by two medical specialists in the same field. I'd been diagnosed with Graves' disease, right? Yeah. And so I went to a couple of, and this is just my approach and my story. Sure. But I thought when the options were given to me, I thought, well, they don't sound too good. 50-50 or 60-40 chance that the medication will work. And I thought to myself, and there's something else causing this. And I was so grateful. For me, it was because you and I, you know, we are we're used to thinking in this slightly different way and used to thinking about the mind, not that either of us has all the answers by any means, as you said, but we're used to, you know, considering the imagination and the subconscious mind and consciousness. And I thought, well, this is interesting. This is a little test. We'll see what we do here. And I, even during that process with the different kinds of training that I had, I had to be so careful to not take as truth the supposed truths that I was being told. Yes. You know, you will not get well from this unless you do A, B, and C. And I'm pleased to report that it has gone. And a medical person may say that I'm in remission. Yes. But as far as I'm concerned, it's gone. It might come back if conditions require that I need to go there again. That's how I sort of look at it.
And, you know, be the exception to the rule. That's what I say. Yeah. And I'm not at all suggesting that we don't support our physicality, our bodies. Of course we do. Yes. You know, that goes without saying. It's not looking at the mind-body connection at the exclusion of treatments or whatever. Yes. It's looking at the whole, putting it together. Yes. That's the thing. And look, I've got a little lesion on my skin, and I've worked in skin cancer clinics. So it's like, oh, it's probably a little basal cell cancer. Medical hat goes on, go and get it cut out. It's like, oh, hang on. No, well, just don't jump the gun. Just wait and explore this a little bit further before jumping into that option. And it might end up being both. I don't know yet. I haven't actually made a final decision on that. But it's very easy for me, even though I'm interested in the whole mind-body connection, it's easy for me to put the medical hat on. Yes. And as I say, if I had acute appendicitis, I would be going to the closest hospital. I wouldn't be sitting on the meditation mat wishing it away, but I would reflect on it.
Yes.
I would reflect on it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, sorry, Catherine.
I was just going to say, and the more we're conscious of our bodies in a healthy way, not a fear-based way, but a healthy way, the more we have that awareness, that alone is very health promoting. Yes. Because the body likes the right sort of attention. You know, that more loving attention. It wants our focus to be on it, not in an obsessive way, but just, okay, yep, you're here. Thank you for the trillions of biochemical and physiological processes you were doing on a daily basis to keep me on the planet. We forget these things, the power, the intelligence, the wisdom of the body. We very easily overlook that.
Yes.
And its capacity to heal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that, you know, when you think of Steve Jobs, not taking the medical option, but
yes,
you know, everyone has their own story.
yes.
And it also was something for me, because I was used to thinking about, well, what is my role in this? What do I have to learn through this? What is this teaching me?
Yes.
I had to also be very careful to not let my ego get in the way.
100%.
And I was still very open to the options that were available through Western medicine.
Absolutely.
Because it's easy to think, well, no, I should be able to fix this myself. Well, no, we've got options available to us.
Exactly.
It's about exploration and openness. Yes,
exactly. And you know, the subtitle of my book is From Fragmentation to Integration. And ideally, you know, we use the best of all these different disciplines, you know, for the benefit of the patient, the client. It's not like this system has all the answers, the rest is crazy.
Yes.
Or this system has all the answers, the rest is crazy. No system has all the answers. They're all very good at different things. But, you know, in an atmosphere of mutual respect and teaching and learning, that to me is true integrative medicine. And I've certainly been humbled by my own body more than a few times. It's like, yeah, no, I'm fine, I'll be fine. And wham, I get something. It's like, oh, okay, no, I need to rethink this and look at this, because illness is a great teacher. It doesn't mean we have to get ill to learn. But if we are unwell, let's milk it for what we can get and learn during the process. And because there's much learning, there's much meaning. Having said that, I want people to be as healthy and have as much well-being and have as long lives as they can. But if they are ill, let's look into it. If they so choose, that's entirely up to the individual.
Yes.
Beyond the physicality alone, particularly for those chronic entrenched conditions that may not fit the medical model, nor have an easy medical answer.
And the other day when we were having a chat, you talked about the purpose of illness. And we've already touched on that a little bit here, but I'm wondering if you can talk to that a little bit more and perhaps give some examples of the sorts of things that either you and without, you know, divulging any sort of confidentiality, what some people you've worked with may have realized the purpose of their illness was. What sorts of things, you know, if people are listening to this thinking, well, what on earth would that be? Would you be able to give us some examples?
I'll give an example, and I'll give my own example. I'd rather talk about myself than other people. A few years back, I had the flu very badly. I was very unwell, influenza A, and I had secondary pneumonia. I ended up in hospital. And it's like, I don't do that. Like, I'm a healthy, fit person, but I did it. It happened. That was a humbling in many ways. And I was on a track that I was not aligned with, basically, not at all. And I had ignored all the mental and emotional cues. And it's like my body said, okay, fine, we're going to take you out of that for a while. So that's why I said it's going to be different for everyone, and we all have to put our personal interpretation of it. And really, you know, flus and fatigues, and really chronic fatigue, generally speaking, there's many conditions under that umbrella. It's withdrawing people from the pressures of life, because if one gets the flu, they get the inflammatory cytokines. The brain doesn't work as well. They get a little bit depressed. They don't want to mingle with people necessarily. They want to hole up inside and recover, because the wisdom of their system is saying, for whatever reason, you know, you need to, the unconscious mind is determining they need to withdraw from the pressures of life for that time, particularly if self-esteem is online.
Yes.
And this is subconscious. I want to emphasize this is very subconscious. The conscious mind doesn't say, oh, I'll get the flu so I can, you know, withdraw from the pressures of life. We don't want the flu.
Yeah.
But that's maybe a simplistic explanation. And the fatigue syndromes, and I'm generalizing, of course. And again, I want to emphasize it doesn't mean we don't address the physicality and deal with what we need to deal with and do the appropriate investigations, of course.
Yeah.
But it can be that, but in a more prolonged sort of, or a much more prolonged phase. Yeah. And it's interesting because I would see people who, you know, would have a lot of, because consciously people want to be well, of course they do, and people should be well ideally, but they might have a whole host of treatments and get better and better and better, and then it reaches a point and then it goes backwards. I saw this many, many times. Yeah. It's like the body's saying, not safe.
Yes.
Not safe to go out there.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it does, even though these things are in the subconscious mind, sometimes it pops into our conscious mind. And if we're paying attention, for example, there are so many people who I work with who admit, oh, well, yeah, when I get sick, I don't have I can actually stop. I can actually take a break. I can slow down. I let myself off the hook a bit, some people say, in terms of all the things I would normally do, the expectations, the pressures,
exactly,
the stresses, and just, you know, giving ourselves the opportunity to stop and look at that before it becomes a chronic situation.
Absolutely.
Might save us a lot.
Absolutely. Because society's saying you've got to do this, be that, and perform this way. But the person might, you know, at their deep level say, no, actually. And that was my experience. You know, I was pushing myself extremely because I was ignoring my intuition that said, don't do this, don't. Yeah. But I did it anyway because I'm quite stoical, and I pushed through until. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't a virus associated. It's a perfect storm. So there are conditions. There are always physical conditions. Yep. There might be genetics, environmental stuff, but I see it as a perfect storm that everything, you know, colludes to say, okay, you're out for a while. And I just relate to what you were saying. I remember a young woman, I think she was a single mother and she had some children. She said, I had the momentary thought passed through my mind, I can get really ill to get out of this. But she stopped it. She had the presence to turn it. She said, no, I'm choosing otherwise. I'm not choosing that. But that's probably something that peeped out of her unconscious mind to her conscious awareness, because she was aware enough to recognize it. Yeah. And she was able to catch it and say, no, I'm not doing that. Yeah. Okay.
And it's also, I think, for some of us, we perceive that the pressures and the expectations sometimes come from, you know, our relationships. So yes, society, yes, work expectations, that sort of thing. But I think often people feel certain sorts of expectations that are perhaps not their own. They're coming from their relationships and the other people around them, and to really listen to our heart or our intuition, or however you think of that inner guidance, that voice, which does give us little red flags. You know, it does provide us with those. Yeah. Sometimes it's very hard to choose to listen to that. And it feels like the path of least resistance sometimes, to just go along with the expectations, especially when there's a long history of it.
Exactly. And no judgment if we do. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. I've made plenty. I'll probably make more. So I think we need to forgive ourselves for being human for a start, but hone our self-awareness as best we can. And we're powerfully influenced by the collective consciousness, powerfully. And one of our greatest fears has been rejected by the tribe, whoever that might be, our community, our family, our friends, our work colleagues, whatever it is, our society in general. And that has a very, very potent influence in our behaviour. I'm saying this related to what you're saying, that we'll go along with the crowd because it's a bit uncomfortable not to. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So we're still controlled by those primal fears. They're just dressed up differently in modern times. But traditionally, being rejected by the tribe meant isolation. We are communal beings, humiliation, and very often death. So it's a powerful controlling factor in the unconscious mind. We are hardwired to we're societal creatures. Yes. So that's a huge threat. So even though that might sound like a dramatic example, and it might feel very subtle, I'll go along with this because I don't want to rock the boat, or I don't want to confront people. It's because, there's that powerful primal directive saying, yeah, go along, do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are always synchronicities, aren't there? Yeah. I've been reading a book lately by Byron Katie. So for people who are listening to this thinking, oh yes, I do that, as we all do. This book may be of interest, and it's such a different way of addressing our need for love, appreciation, approval, the belief that we need it, those primal sort of motivators, and I found it quite illuminating. Byron Katie, it's called I think it's called I Need Your Love. Okay. Is that true? ?
Yeah.
So
and the book I read, I think, was called Loving What Is, Accepting What Is.
Yep.
We have an expectation this person should behave this way. Well, they're not behaving that way. They're behaving the other way because that's who they are. Yes. Accept it. Now, I'm working on that.
Yes, so am I.
And when we accept, it doesn't mean we don't have appropriate boundaries.
Yeah.
But it's like we have to accept their beingness of who they are because that's who they are.
Yeah.
And it's either we go along with it or we don't, our choice. But it's actually very refreshing, her work.
It is. And the simple point she makes, that if we argue with reality, we're causing ourselves pain.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lovely series of books or 2 books, I think. I think it's Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Agreements.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not similar, but some aspects are similar. Don't be offended by anything because that's
nothing personally.
Yes. Easier said than done, of course.
Yeah.
But some simple wisdom goes a long way.
Yes. Yeah. What are those 4? So take nothing personally.
Be very careful about your speech.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because always do your best at whatever you're doing. Always do your best. There's one that's something. Yeah. Wonderful books. Yeah. But Catherine, if people want a copy of your book, how would they go about obtaining that?
Just Google it, and it should be through the main places where you buy books online.
Yep.
They won't find them in bookstores because it's a print on demand sort of thing, but the usual outlets, online outlets.
Okay.
They'll be able to buy a digital or a hard copy.
Okay, great. So it's Dr. Catherine Fyans, and it's The Wounding of Healthcare, from Fragmentation to Integration.
Yeah.
Great. And I'll put a link to one of the bookshops, to online bookshops with the book in the copy of this this episode as well, for anyone who wants to just click on it and order it from there.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you would just like to leave us with before we sign off, Catherine? And you've already given us so very much, so thank you.
I'd just like to remind people that we're extraordinarily resilient, and we forget that, and I think we've forgotten that recently. And when you look through the ages of what humanity has endured and grown through, we really do need to pat ourselves on the back and just remind ourselves that we're pretty amazing people, because it's very easy to get messages that we're not.
Yes.
But we are. And people tuning into their intuition, their deep inner voice, getting familiar with it, getting to know it as best they can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
so
much, Catherine.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's really been an honor, and it's so, so deeply meaningful for me, this conversation. I really appreciate your openness.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
And listeners, and watchers, thank you for, by listening, being a part of this conversation too. And we'll look forward to speaking with you and being with you over the waves next time. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure.